Okay. So you got to hunt in Germany. When were you over in Germany?
Uh, was in Germany for approximately 2.5 years through the first part of 1955. So it would have been 53 through 55,
Okay.
basically.
And where were you at down there? Don't have to be specific, but just sort of
I
generally.
was stationed right outside of a little ways outside of Munich at a little town called Erding in Bavaria.
Okay. And you got to do some hunting while you were over there?
Yeah, the was there as a member of the Air Force, obviously in the military. The European command had set up what they called the military recreation uh, program, if you will, and this allowed you to do a lot of things over there, both sponsored by the military and other things. For instance, they did have a hunting program. Now, that entailed more than just saying, "Hey, I want to go hunting." You had to apply for a hunting expedition, if you want to call it that. The way it worked was that you put in for a hunt. In my case, I put in for a big game hunt. There were other sorts of hunts, but I put in for a big game hunt. What you did was, if you were accepted, you went to school because you had to go through for what amounted to the German hunting permit. It would sort of be like our hunter safety course, except it was more extensive. You also had to know all of the regulations. You had to know all of the traditions, which were at least a big thing in Germany, and I suspect the rest of Europe, to do with a hunt. You just didn't go out and shoot an animal, and that was it. If you completed the course satisfactorily, you received a certificate saying that you were eligible then to hunt. And then you set up with a guide. You had a German Jaeger or guide, a professional, who had a specific area that he was responsible for. And you went in usually just one person at a time. They didn't have big hunts, at least for this sort of thing. You went and met your guide, and you went out for your hunt. The hunts weren't long and extensive, like a week's worth. Generally, it was about a day, possibly two, depending on where you were hunting. In my case, I was able to draw a permit for a hirsch, Hirsh, which is about like our mule deer, maybe a tad bigger. Might be like a small elk. Bigger than our standard deer by a long shot. Like I said, it was more like our mule deer or a small elk. The area we hunted was at the base of, well, the lower section of the Alps, Austrian Alps, Austrian German Alps, and went there the day that it was set up for the hunt. Met the guide, who was a professional Jaeger or hunter, as you will, and he was an older fella, and he had his traditional hunter's dress, if you will. He also had his little dog. They always had the little dog with them, partly for companionship, but they were tracking dogs as well. This little souvenir that I picked up, if you will, could well have been modeled after the little fella I had, including his little dog, including the pipe. One of the things that doesn't show here that he did wear was what they called a loden mantel. Now, this was a cape that went down to about to the knees or a little less than that. It was generally forest. I wanted to buy one, but I couldn't afford it at the time, and then sort of forgot about it. Other things took precedent. It was wool. It was dark forest green. It had pockets on the inside. It was thick. It was waterproof, windproof, and warm. The idea being that if you got caught out someplace, you just huddled down in that thing, sat under a tree or wherever you could find for shelter, and you could get along just about as well as if you had a tent and a whole bunch of camping gear with you. It was amazing what you'd have tucked away in their pockets in their loading mantle. We went out went up the side of the mountain to a hunting camp. The hunting camp was well, they called it, you could call it a lodge. It really wasn't. It was a log cabin, and it was 2 bedrooms and 1 large room that had a kitchen and then just a main room. Since it was built on the side of the mountain, It was at one level, but underneath it was an open area, another area that was open to the outside with like small barn doors. If they took anything into these places, to these camps, which are up in the mountains, like I said, there were not roads running up in there. They would pack in with mules or whatever, donkeys, and when they stayed overnight, the bottom part was a stable. They always kept firewood down there, and they kept feed down there for the animals when they had to go in. It was quite interesting. It was not fancy at all. It supposedly was used by some German general, I was told. I don't know, legendary sort of thing. But it was not fancy at all. It was very plain, but quite comfortable. The little German Jaeger I had, guide, he spoke next to no English. He understood more than he spoke. I spoke a limited amount of German and was pretty good with sign language, so we got along quite well. When I went hunting at that point, I took the rifle that I had was a Mannlicher Schoenauer double set trigger, full rifle in 30-06. We got up there and we're going over some things, and he was quite interested in the rifle. He thought that was a very nice rifle. Of course, Mannlicher was. He was a little disturbed that he kept asking me, kind optic, no scope. And I said no. Over there, they hunt basically from stands, and they almost exclusively use a scoped rifle. 2 reasons I did not buy a scope: I didn't feel it warranted the expense, and also I wasn't convinced that I wanted to have a German scope for use back in this country. So he was a little disturbed about that, but I explained that excuse me, that I'd shot the thing, and at 100 meters we had about a 2-inch group, and he looked at the iron sights, and they did have the flip ups, and he thought that was all fine, that we could probably make do with that. He was very pleased that I had a 30-06. He had, I believe it was an 8mm, and I had a 30-06 cartridge, and he had quite a good time comparing them and talking about them. So all was well and good. The dog didn't seem much interested. He curled up in a corner by the fire, and that was that. He thought that he was not concerned with that at all. We went out the next morning to a designated stand and spent the day there. Now, one of the things about the hunting over there, it's like they do in many other areas, including some of our larger game farms. You just don't see a hirsch and shoot it. They crop them. It has to be the right age, size, and everything to be shootable, if you will. We saw 2, one buck and one doe. Neither one of them were shootable. So like, nix scheisen, don't shoot. And he was very quick to point out that it was a pretty animal, but it was not one to be shot. So we had a good day out in the stand. We did see some wildlife. We saw a couple of the game animals, and there were a lot of other little animals and birds and what have you running around. So it was quite a pleasant day. The weather was good and the whole works. That night we went back to the lodge, and that was it for the hunt. As I say, they weren't extensive. You took your chances. It wasn't terribly expensive, so it wasn't a big deal. The next day we hiked back down the mountain. Oh, by the way, hiking up, this fella and his little dog took off up the side of the mountain, and he had the pack with the food and so forth in it that he had to take up that wasn't already up there, and I had just a small amount of stuff. And when he went up the side of that mountain, he went up the side of that mountain, and the dog kept up, better probably than I did. I was in pretty good shape, but it was a long way up, and it was over trails, and when I got there I was glad we were up as far as we had to go. So that was pretty much it for the hunt. Didn't get anything, but was not a bit disappointed with it. One of the things that did prompt me to do, or allow me to do, if you will, is all of the foresters and the hunters over there have their hat. And in Bavaria, it tends to be like this. In fact, this is exactly what this is. This is a Jaeger suit. They wore them. If you were a hunter, it was not really accepted for you to go get one of these unless you had been hunting and were certified to hunt. You didn't have to be a Jaeger, a professional, but you had to have been there, if you will. there was a little town called Haag in Bavaria, not too far from where I was stationed at Erding, that at that time was the hat maker for almost all of the professional foresters and Jaegers, hunters in Bavaria. So, since it wasn't too far away, I went down there and wound up at, let me see, this is, by the way, an Edelweiss hoot, which is, Edelweiss is the little flower, and hoot, of course, is hat. The outfit was Hoot Nittelberger in Haag Oberbayern. And he did all the measurements, and he fitted me out, and after a while, out came the hat. This was in 1953. I brought it back with me, and I wore it almost all the time hunting, or when I was out, except in real cold weather, when it wasn't obviously anything like, well, it's still in good shape. It still works, and it'll probably work if one of the guys manages to get it to fit. Why, it'll probably work for them for 50 years. One of the things that we noticed in the video we were watching of that German hunt was boar hunt, and they had it up, and they had a piece of foliage stuck in the animal's mouth. And I said, well, yeah, they were very strong on tradition, and it was kind of nice. When you went hunting, you had certain things that you did or didn't do that were proper. One of the things, if you did get a game animal, what you did was you broke off a piece of fresh foliage and you tucked it in the animal's mouth. It was called the Lestbitzen, the last bite. This was sort of an honor and something that you owed to the animal. You also took another little piece broken off, you dipped it in the blood, and you tucked it in the side of your hat. That was to indicate, again, the connection between you and the animal and in honor of it and all the rest of it. So it was kind of interesting to see that. I imagine most of the traditions are still alive over there. It seems to be. I wouldn't know. It's been many, many years. Some years back, though, when we were still up north in Wisconsin, in the Rod and Gun Club, there was a fellow that was from Germany. And this was, that would have been, in the early 90s, right? Yeah. Late 80s and early 90s. He was going to go back. He had been working for some outfit here in the States. He spoke English perfectly. He was an American citizen as far as I know. But he had decided that he was going to retire from what he was doing and move back. He was also a certified hunter. And we compared notes. And apparently, as time went on there as well as here, the course that you had to go through got more and more difficult and a lot stricter. Well, I think it went along with the fact that they were obliged, as we should be, more restrictive in how you hunted, what you hunted, under what conditions, and how well you are supposed to be. We sometimes, I think, lag behind on that, but that's a whole different subject to discussion. So there's my little band, at any rate, with his little dog. The traditions went beyond that. After we came back out, if you had gotten a game animal, okay, very often you would put on then a game feed. This was a traditional sort of thing. You would host the dinner, and in doing that, when you served, you probably everybody would have a nice German beer flask, and you would have, if you were doing it properly, you would serve with this is from over there, by the way, a proper set of cutlery to go along with it. And
go ahead and hold one of those up.
Pardon?
Oh, go ahead and hold one of those up.
Okay. Fork, as such, and knife. And let me get the thing loose without cutting something. Nice little steak knife. There is also a set of serving implements, which I sent back 2 sets. One went back to my mother, to Grandma, and it stayed with her. The other set was in a box of stuff that never got to the States. It got sidetracked, let's put it this way, at the docks and back here in the States. See, this happens to be Kronenkrebs was the outfit there that put this out. But it was all done very formally and just a hell of a lot of fun. After got back, we used to do a lot of hunting, particularly bird hunting up north, which is one of the times, of course, I wore my hat. But we would put on the feed quite often at home, and we would do the same thing. We would have the guys that were on the hunt over for partridge with whatever went with it, or venison or whatever went with it, and just sort of carried the tradition on. And I guess I'm sort of old-fashioned in that, but I like a lot of the traditional ways of doing a lot of things, including hunting and what have you.
Now, the little dog, what was the little dog for?
Oh, for company for him. It's a tracking dog, as I said earlier. Yeah, so if you hit something, now we're talking about big game. I don't know much about small game because I didn't do any hunting of that. If you hit something and it ran off in the mountains, you could track, but it just made life a whole lot easier when you had your tracking dog. Your Jaeger would get out there and put them on the scent, and then you went, because just wandering up, the Alps are not, little bumps in the ground. You're up in the air, and it's timbered country, it's mountainous, and it's steep. It's a lot easier to have a little dog take you where you need to go than just to wander around trying to sidetrack or whatever.